Okay, we are live. This is Attorney Vince Davis, and this is The Secret, How to Fight CPS and Win. I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Darren Guai. Darren, how are you this morning?
I'm good, Mr. Davis. Very good. Thank you for asking.
Good, and I see we have a special guest on the show with us, Miss Lydia Opal, is it Docher?
Mm-hmm.
Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Okay, how are you, Lydia?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good. Where are you coming to us from?
California, San Luis Obispo.
Oh, okay. San Luis. Now, what is that? What county is that?
San Luis Obispo?
Is it the same?
Yeah, it's the county.
Okay. Where is that in relationship to Merced? I did a 2-day trial in Merced last week.
Well, we're like 2 hours below Bakersfield and maybe like 2 hours above Santa Barbara. We're like
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Very good. So, what's going on with CPS and SLOW?
Well, from how I can see it, as when I was like reading like statistics online and stuff, they're the highest paid social workers in the state.
Really?
Yes. They're just very corrupt. They are extremely known for making reports. Like you could tell them something, like you could be like, "Oh, I was walking my dog yesterday," and the report would be like, "Yeah, she kicked a dog." It's just like it's all what, like
Right.
they are very biased when it comes to writing reports. They just lie a lot and steal people's kids.
I was talking to someone, this is years ago, about trying to, I guess, make changes in CPS here in Los Angeles County. And the organizational theory is that you basically have to fire everyone and start over.
Yes.
Because of I forget how they described it, but it's basically the mental process that's entrenched in social workers, right now in the system. I mean, there's certain things they do, and there are certain things they've been taught to do, and certain things that they've learned to do, and that it's just okay. And from an organizational standpoint, you can't really unlearn that,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you want to win a case and you need to twist the facts a little bit, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
As an organization, I've been in many cases where I've seen that happen. And interestingly enough, I told a story not too long ago about a case that hinged on the statement of a child. And the child wasn't a little kid. The kid was like 13 or 14. Time goes by, parents lose custody, the grandparents get the kids, but in the end, they all live together. And I was speaking to that kid after the case was over, and she said, Mr. Davis, I never said that. I was asked about it, and I shook my head no. I didn't say anything, but they just adopted that as my statement. And the more I thought about it, and the more I didn't realize this at the time, but it was a statement that the kid couldn't have said. It was too sophisticated of a statement. In my trial last week, the social worker said the kid said blah, blah, blah. I said, oh, did the kid use those exact words? The kid's only like 7 years old at the time. And the social worker thought about it on the stand, and it was like, well, no, she didn't use those exact words. And I said, well, what exact words did she use? And when she said the words, it was not even, in my mind, not even close. Kid said, oh, the sky, the sun shining, outside. And, social worker writes, well, the kid said, it was gray, cloudy, and gloomy.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened to you personally?
I had a CPS worker come to my house with a investigative warrant. My oldest son was watching my baby at the time, and I'd only been gone like 5-10 minutes. So we just missed each other. They told my son, because she was accompanied by police officers, that they had a search warrant to search the house. So they came inside, searched my house. They found paraphernalia down in my basement, which I was unaware of, and then they removed my kids. So when I pulled back up to my house, the social worker was like, "Oh, I'm removing your kids because this is what we found." I was like, I had no idea, you know. And the officer and her were like, "Well, if you could drug test first today, that will give your kids back today." I was like, okay, great, you know, like, you know, stress relief. So I called her later and I was like, "Hey, can I test for you?" And she's like, "I never said that." It's like,
Mm.
okay. Well, then, like 3 days later, she took my kids to get a medical examination, all four of them, which I thought was kind of like weird because like abuse or, you know, no, that was like even, you know, it wasn't the allegation. The next social worker that I got, she said that she had talked to a detective and that he like told her all kinds of stuff, statements from her, and my whole case plan was based off of that. I finally got a hold of the detective later down the road, and I was like, "Hey, you know, like this is news to me, you know, like what is all this stuff?" And he's like, "We never talked to her." He's like, "We never returned her phone call." And he's like, "We wouldn't have talked to her anyways if that was an open investigation." I was just like, okay. Like, so I told my attorney, my public defender, I was like, "Hey, like, you know, this whole thing is fake. You know, like she made this up, like the cop even said it." And she's like, "Oh, well, we're already past that." So she's like, "Just keep moving forward on in the case."
How
I
long
was
ago
like,
was that?
so it happened April 18th of 2022, and they didn't even file charges until this year of February. Then those got dropped.
So when did you first find out that
Oh, that
the police said XYZ?
um, I would the when I first found out, it was the first report. So in June,
Of what year?
2022.
Okay. Have you spoken to anyone about a civil rights lawsuit?
No.
You should consider that because the social worker lying in a report to the judge is like, one of the top three reasons to have a civil rights lawsuit.
Yes. But yeah, it was just really frustrating to me that they wouldn't go back and like at least tell the judge or bring it to the judge's attention. They're like, "Oh, there's nothing she could do about it." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Be careful with your terminology. In other words, a lot of people throw pronouns around. He, they, she.
So just be
You know,
specific.
because it matters whether the judge wouldn't do it. It matters whether the social worker wouldn't do it. It matters whether it was your attorney who wouldn't do it. So when you say they wouldn't review it,
My public defender wouldn't review it. She's the one who told me that the judge wouldn't be able to do anything about it. I spoke to the social worker supervisor, their case manager. They said pretty much sorry about your luck and just keep focused on the case, like moving forward. That's one thing I
that's
keep hearing.
yeah, that's one um I guess line of advice you can take.
Hmm.
It's not totally, out in left field. But it's not what I would do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I would keep you focused on the case moving forward, but also I'd start a new road, and the new road would be civil rights violation against that social worker. Social workers, are not allowed to lie to the judge in reports or in statements. Not allowed. So if you have a police officer who will say, I never talked to the social worker and she wrote in the
Hmm.
report, oh, the police told me blah, 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 that's a big deal. That's I was going to say almost criminal. It is criminal.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And by the way, if you went on the stand and you told the judge something that was false under penalty of perjury, they'd throw you under the courthouse.
Hmm. In a
Mm.
heartbeat.
Right, right. I had a civil rights lawsuit. This is several years ago, where we sued the social worker, and in her videotape deposition, she admitted she lied. The case ended up settling because they didn't want to go to court. They didn't want to, get the wrath of a federal judge for lying in a state court proceeding. But yeah, social workers can't lie. There's a it's a well-known YouTube video about a woman attorney trying to argue to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals that social workers shouldn't be able to be sued when they lie in juvenile dependency court. And basically, that attorney got laughed out of the courtroom.
Good.
Three very conservative judges, I don't know if they were Reagan appointees or Bush appointees or whatever, but three very conservative judges basically asked, they didn't say these words, but it was basically like, are you crazy?
Yeah.
You can't come to court and lie under oath and not be responsible for it.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think it was Orange County who sent this young attorney to try to carve out an additional exception to protect social workers. And, the justices weren't having it. I recommend that you find that video and watch it. It's
Okay.
pretty astounding what this social workers is. Basically, they were saying social workers were above the law, and the judges weren't going for it.
Yeah, they're close to it.
No. Well, they have a lot of protection. They have that qualified immunity thing going on for them, but you can't come to court and lie. So the three big things that you can sue a social worker for, not the only thing, but the three big things are, number one, social worker takes your kid without a warrant. Okay. Sounds like that's what happened to you. And they'd have to prove that it was a, what do they call it? Exigent circumstance.
That's what they said it was, but I don't understand how it was.
Yeah. And a lot of times, not a lot of times, but I've read a couple of appellate opinions where social workers say, oh, it was an emergency circumstance, exigent. And the Court of Appeal says, no, it wasn't. You could have gone and get a warrant, within a few hours and come back. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's one that wasn't, well, I won't give you that example, but so that's the first way you can sue a social worker. The second way you can sue a social worker is if they cause, either directly or indirectly, the abuse of a child.
Yes.
For example, they put you in a foster home as a child and you're physically or sexually abused or emotionally abused in that foster home.
Or medically abused.
Yeah. Or the social worker perpetrates that abuse, him or herself.
I have a question.
Hold on. Before
sorry.
you pose that question, the third way you can sue is if the social worker lies. What's your question?
So my youngest son, he started getting sick like about November 1st. Well, it was like just a normal cold, but each visit, like the cold was progressing. So like November 20th, I want to say, I was like, hey, like he is like really sick now. Like, can you guys please get him to the doctor? And they would lie and say that he had an appointment made. Well, he ended up getting him sent home by his therapist because he had a fever. He was like nodding off sick. Well, then on Thanksgiving, he had a fever of 102. This like a couple days later, and it just like continued. Like he was very sick, and they kept refusing to take him to the doctor, saying that they don't believe in taking kids to the doctor all the time when they're sick. They don't believe in giving them medicine all the time. And like I made a CPS report against them for medical neglect, and my social worker told me that I'd set my case back by that, and put me back to supervised visits, took away visits, and then after the CPS report that I made, they made her take him to the doctor. He had 2 ear infections and an upper respiratory infection. So they put him on antibiotics, and then less than a week later, I'm assuming when the antibiotics ran out, his cough came back. And I was like, okay, well, that means that the medicine didn't work. You need to take him back. Well, that went on for another couple of weeks. And when he did go back to the doctor put him on a 24-hour watch and more antibiotics because it moved to an inner ear infection on both ears. And like, it just,
that child has a lawsuit against the social worker.
And he didn't talk it delayed his talking. Like he still doesn't talk now.
So he has a pretty big lawsuit
Hmm.
against. Now that, by the way, that lawsuit is not even connected to your lawsuit. And what I would suggest is that they be brought separately, because the way counties are, when it gets down to, if you make it to trial, they'll want to settle with you instead of going to trial. But the playbook, the defense playbook that they use and that I've seen in my experience is they limit the amount of money no matter how many plaintiffs they have. So if they have you and your son, they're going to that to, a certain amount. Whereas if you sue and your son sues separately, the limits, there's two different limits. So automatically, you would presumably get twice the money if you bring the lawsuit separately.
Nice, because I saved all of the text messages that I had from my social worker at the time, like from November all the way until the ear infection. And one of the messages when I brought it back up, because I wanted him back to the doctor, is the only response he gave me was, well, do you have anybody in mind that you would want to adopt your children? I was like, it was like a dry threat. I was like, are you like, what? Ask for my son to be seen to the doctor, and that's what you say? I'm like, all right.
Did you get your kids back?
No, not yet.
When is your next court date?
September.
And what type of hearing is it?
It's gonna be my 18th month.
Are you close to getting them back?
I think so. Now that I have another new worker, he seems like a lot more logical and reasonable than the rest of them were. Because the previous worker, the same one that wouldn't take him to the doctor, like at our 12-month review, he wanted to like keep the case open because when I was at therapy with my youngest son, his foster mom was saying that he wasn't like exhibiting that he could like self-protect. Like, when you fall, you go to put your arms out. He just barely started crawling at this point, but she was telling his therapist that. So he started crawling up some like foam blocks and he like went to fall back and he was about to like, regain his balance, keep playing. Well, she pushed him backwards and he fell backwards and he hit his head on the ground and like you could just hear the loud crack from his head impacting the floor. Like I was furious. Like I like kept my composure because I know how they are about that. And I was like, like I better not ever see that or hear about that again. You like do not do that to my son. Like, why would you freaking push him?
How old is he?
He is 18 months now.
Oh, so he really can't even protect himself.
No.
Yeah. Hey,
And he barely talks still.
Is your child with relatives or foster parent?
My two youngest are still with the foster mom.
How many kids are involved altogether?
I have 4 boys.
Where are the other 2?
They're with my mom.
How come your mom doesn't
handle all of them?
Oh, she said she couldn't handle all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Where are there any other relatives?
No.
No friends?
Mm-mm. Not very social.
Darren, I want you to watch this, okay? This is what happens with a lot of cases. But I bet I can get, and it's going to take too long, but I could get her to give me a list of 25 names of people that might be able to take her kids. Did you know that the people that you could place your children with don't have to live in your county?
No, I didn't know that.
Right. Did you know that they didn't have to even live in the state of California?
No.
Right. Did you know that they could live in some state like New York or Maine?
Mm-mm.
Did you know that they didn't even have to live in the country?
No, that's interesting.
Right. So now that you know all of that, does that give you any additional names to put on a list?
Yeah.
Darren, you listening to this?
Yes, sir.
The reason why you don't know this is because no one's ever told you. And you probably assume that the person had to live in San Luis Obispo County.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in some cases, social workers tell you the person has to live in San Luis Obispo County. And that's, this white lie number 4. It's not true. So now what I want you to do after the show
Mhm.
is to make a list of 25 names of people that might, I didn't say would, don't call anybody, that might be able to take the kids. Okay. Name, address, telephone number, and the relationship of that person to the kid, not to you.
Okay.
All right. And if it's a family friend, just put family friend. You are not limited to placing your kids with blood relatives. Okay. The law says blood relatives or nephrons, non-related family members.
Okay.
Your best friend from college, right? Or your
Mhm.
best girlfriend who lives in Sweden. I said Sweden because I did a case a few years ago in Sweden. So
That's awesome.
the kid's going to Sweden. Did you know Sweden has a CPS?
Do now.
Right. Most Western countries do have CPS. Now,
Sorry.
they're
Yes,
not
was that
all
where?
they're not all administered like our CPSs. And as a matter of fact, Sweden's CPS referred to our system as they use the Swedish slang word, but basically crazy.
Look at it, easy.
So make that list. Give that list to your attorney, or email it to the social worker and say, I want all of these people
Why do you?
investigated. And you got to do it now before the 18-month date.
Okay.
There's a lot of
Why is
reasons.
it? Yeah. Why is it that you want to? Why is it that you want to do a substantial list like that? Because it gets the child within the realms of where you want it, or is there a strategy to it, or what is the behind the whole 25 names thing? What is the?
I'm glad you asked that. And I tell this to a lot of people, and they don't get it, even after I tell them. Okay. Now, I want you to think of if you're a child, where would you best be placed if you can't go back to mommy?
To anybody that knew him.
Yeah, a stranger, foster parent, or
Right.
somebody that knows them. How about somebody that's related to them?
Mhm.
Because the foster parent didn't know them either, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Now, I don't know if you realize this. You can do some research on this about the incidence of abuse to foster children in foster homes.
Mm-hmm.
See, CPS judges don't know about this because when it
They hide
happens,
it.
no, they don't hide it. They don't know about it
Mm-hmm.
because the social worker doesn't tell them.
Yeah,
Okay?
they don't even tell them that their mother. They ask for their mom and dad. They don't tell them anything.
I was in
Many,
foster care most of my childhood.
okay, many years ago, a few decades ago, I represented a woman who was a foster parent in what I will call a secret court proceeding that doesn't even happen at the courthouse. It's an administrative hearing that happens at the state building here in LA, in downtown Los Angeles. Nobody knows about these hearings. And I represented a foster mother who was responsible for the death of a child. Death of a child. And they wanted to take her foster care license away. She hired me to try to stop it. Now, do you think anybody at the CPS court knew about this?
No.
You know who did know about it? The social worker.
Social worker, right? Yeah.
So if you think, I know a couple of attorneys, by the way, all they do is represent foster parents in proceedings like that. That's how many times foster parents are disciplined or prosecuted for abuse or neglect. So we think that we're putting kids in foster homes and it's the perfect foster home. Nothing's going to happen to the kid.
Yeah.
That can be further from the truth.
It's terrible in there.
Now, I'm not saying all foster parents are bad. I'm not saying that. Don't tell Miss G I said that. But I'm not saying that. All right? But foster care is not perfect. Not by a long
No,
not by a
not
long
even close.
Yeah. So getting back to the rationale. So you want to get a kid with a relative or close family friend. And by the way, there are some relatives that are given priority over other relatives. I had this discussion several months ago where I was told that the kid was with, a fourth cousin once removed or something crazy like that, tangentially related, and that CPS didn't want to move the kid to the grandmother. Mainly because the cousin was anti-parent and the grandmother was pro-parent. So I had to pull out that little trick. Oh, have you seen this in the code? It says certain relatives are given preferential treatment. Grandma is one of those relatives. So are adult siblings. So are aunts and uncles. Right? So if a social worker ever tells you that, tell your lawyer that you want to challenge that in court.
Okay.
Anyway, that's one of the reasons. Okay? Now I'm going to give you a second reason that I found in my experience of over 30 years in doing these cases. And I've actually been called out on it in court one time by a judge. It's kind of funny. I gave a list of 25 names. And I told the judge, hey judge, I gave the list to the social worker. And the social worker's attorney says in court, yeah, it's 25 names. And I'm like, okay, sounds about right. The judge said, Mr. Davis, I think you're harassing the social worker. Harassing the social worker.
What?
Because, it takes about maybe 2 hours to properly vet a relative.
I like where you're going with this.
So if you give 25 names, that's 50 hours.
Mm-hmm.
That's 1 week plus of work.
Okay.
So that judge says to me, we'll start at the top and we'll do one at a time. And I said, well, Your Honor, I understand your concern. But the code says that they have to consider all relatives. And I think it would be improper for you to tell CPS how to do their job. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not part of the judicial process. In my opinion, judges determine disputes of fact and disputes of law. Anyway, I lost the argument, but guess what? The first relative on the list, CPS approved. You know why? They had not approved her previously. But they didn't have a real rationale to keep the kids away from her. And it was grandma. I think it was mother's grandma, mother's mother. But this is what they faced. If they don't approve grandma, they face 50 hours of work. That's number one. Number two, at least half of the relatives are generally out of county or out of the state, some out of the damn country. Now, when a kid is moved, guess where the federal money goes? It follows the kid. So if you're San Luis Obispo County and you place a kid in LA County, guess who gets the money? LA. I mean, San Luis gets some money, but the bulk of the money is now going to go to LA.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we always are talking about the economic impact of CPS and them making money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Good money.
Right. So if you're selling hamburgers, are you going to willfully lose a sale? Right?
No.
Are you willfully going to give money to LA?
Right.
Who has like a $2 billion budget or something crazy like that?
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, grandma who lives right down the street in San Luis looks real good now.
Right. Yeah.
She looks like a freaking superstar.
Oh, that's funny.
Why? Because it saves time for the worker. Number two, it saves the county money.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
that's a good angle.
Oh, I've only been doing it 30 years.
It's very smart.
But it's as simple and as plain and as obvious as the glasses I'm wearing on my face. There's nothing sophisticated. You have to realize what these people's agenda are and what they want, and you have to play to that. You know, my mother is Japanese, and when I was growing up, I had to take martial arts. One of the martial arts I took was judo. Do you know anything about judo?
Other than you fight?
The whole Eastern philosophy in martial arts is to allow your opponent to get close to you so that you can defeat them. You know, there's that old book from that Renaissance Italian philosopher and politician whose name escapes me now, but he wrote a book called The Prince. Okay, famous book. He said, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, the thing that I noticed with a lot of parents, and I try to talk them down out of this, is they don't want to follow that philosophy. You know, the CPS case is not the time to get even. The CPS case is for you to get your kids back. The time to get even is after you get them back, then you sue. You go to federal court and you sue them. Now, I notice one of the people who's posting from YouTube, he said earlier he wants to see them lose their job. Okay.
That's tough.
That is very tough for a civil servant. As a matter of fact, in all of the cases that I know about and have done, only one woman, CPS worker, ever lost her job. And she fought to keep it. And she lost that. That didn't have anything to do with the civil rights lawsuit. That was that civil servant type of protection and hearing process, right? But she was fired. Somebody told me recently, and I don't know if it's true, that she got her job back eventually, like after years went by, like 4 or 5 years went by. She went back and reapplied and they hired her. I don't know if that's true or not. But, you know, when you're a government employee, you got substantial protection from, you know, being fired and losing your pension and all of that. Although it can happen, it's not likely to happen, right? So you got a list. You got to have 25. You got to make it worth their while to find a relative or to approve that relative or friend that's at the top of your list that they've already rejected.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Darren,
makes good sense.
have I sufficiently explained to you some, not all, some of the strategies behind the 25 names?
Yes.
Absolutely.
You are extremely smart. I like how you think.
Dashing Davis here.
I want to tell you something, Lydia. It has nothing to do with being smart. Really, it doesn't. It has to do with experience and seeing these things over and over and thinking about, you know, what can I do different to get the result that I want? And that's just experience.
But that's how they think.
Oh, but see, they're more organized than parents.
Yeah.
They're definitely organized.
Well, yeah, they tell you if you talk about your case with anybody, they'll charge you with a misdemeanor because everything's supposed to be confidential.
Yeah, 827 of the Welfare and Institutions Code. It is. You can't mention the kid's name. You can't talk about anything regarding that kid. Yeah, it is. But they have that protection. They have that protection that they think that they can flaunt anytime they want. But as I tell people all the time, my grandma told me, don't get mad, get even.
Get even.
Get your kids back and get even. When did you say your next court date is?
September.
Is there a possibility you and your lawyer can file a 388 petition?
Probably.
Have you finished all of the services?
Yes. Well, kind of, yes. Like, we've been following our case plan the whole time. It's just they keep, like, we have to continue it until, I guess, the case is over, like drug testing, therapy, couples therapy. And so we're just consistently
what I
doing
would
that.
do is I would advise you to talk to your lawyer. File a 388. Make sure it's a really good 388. And if the judge denies it, file an appeal immediately.
Okay.
Because that will shift the burden onto the social worker and maybe even the court to give you back your kids at the 18-month hearing. Because now they know that you will appeal. See, before I'll bet $1, Darren, I'll bet $1 that this lady has never filed an appeal or a writ.
No.
Okay.
I
got it.
And I can tell you the reason why I know that. I'm going to tell you this, and this is not a slap on you, so don't take it the wrong way. I'm just trying to tell people who are going to be watching this. The reason why I know that is because you don't know enough about your case. How do I know that? How do I know that? Because I've got 37 years of experience, and I'm talking to you. So there's things that you don't know. And you don't know the reason why you don't know is because your lawyer or lawyers have never explained it to you.
What you think you know is wrong.
I come across some people sometimes that are in your position, but they've done research on their own. And that even actually makes it worse a lot of times.
Yeah.
Because they think they know the law and they start forming strategies based upon what they think. The problem is that they may be 50% wrong. They may be 10% wrong. But, when you're 10% wrong, you're still wrong. And the strategy you come up with is going to be wrong. And then when you go to court, you claim corruption, which there might be, but, corruption. But there's not. It's just that you didn't know the game. You just didn't know the game.
Like you said, what do you think you know? It's all wrong at CPS court. It's a whole different place to play.
Yeah, everything about it is completely different from criminal, I think, anyways. But
it's completely different. In criminal, you have rights.
Because you stand a chance. At least you stand a chance in criminal court.
There was a movie. I don't know if you saw that movie about CPS. And in the movie, the guy interviews for maybe a third to 20% of the movie are interviews with people involved in the system. And 80% maybe is about the families that are involved. Well, he interviewed me. And one of the things that I said, and I said this kind of spontaneously, but the more and more I thought about it, and, he told me later that, the more he thought about it, it was absolutely true. You have more rights in criminal court than you do in CPS court.
Absolutely.
But most people care more about losing their kids than they do going to jail.
Absolutely.
In jail, you're going to get out.
Yeah.
Right? Most places are safe. They're going to put you on probation, depending how serious it was. And if you go, you're going to get a half time. You'll be out, and whatever. Right?
Correct.
I just had a client who was on parole. Okay, and he caught a parole violation. All right. So he could have gone back to jail, I think, for 3 years. Okay.
Damn.
for his parole violation because they let him out early, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he had his parole hearing, and the judge gave him 90 days. 3 years, 90 days. So when I say to you, people are more concerned about their kids than they are going to jail, it's because of stuff like that. We don't, as a society, we don't have enough money and resources to put everybody in jail that commits crimes. That's fortunately or unfortunately.
But we have more than enough money to take kids.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole separate business, my friend. That's a whole separate money pot. And we take kids, and think, and we really think we're doing the right thing. We really do.
Do they really think that? Do people really
they
think
really
that
do.
with the amount of
do.
and
It's like Darren, it's like they're saving the world.
Most of them don't even have kids. The social workers in my area, at least.
A few years ago, I was asked to speak at a conference of young people who were graduating with master's or undergraduate degrees in social work. And, while I was talking to them, because it was kind of a classroom setting, you talk about dreams and ideas and saving the world. Most people think that that's what they're doing. You know why? Because they've been fed the line. They've been fed the story. Those higher up in CPS and those in charge of making the money, they know what's up.
Mm-hmm.
It's like being in a war. Hey, you're going to go defend democracy. You're going to go fight.
You're in it.
But when it really, 50 years from now, we'll learn about, it was about some big company wanting, the oil or the gold in that country. It had nothing to do with democracy.
Right.
That's the spin we put on it to sell it to people so that they'll go fight for us.
But the American public, do you think the American public, with the amount of outcry that's going on with people, shows like yours, shows like ours, the podcasts that everybody's doing, the Twitter accounts, there is so much overwhelming, hey, this is corrupt, this is bad, and still people just go on with their day-to-day business.
They don't want to risk their kids.
But you know what? Hey, guess what? We'll support the Ukraine, whoa, let's get on and put a Ukrainian flag on, what the heck is going on? For real. But yet there's children in this country being legitimately kidnapped every day by the number one agency that has been put into place to protect them. And they're the leaders in trafficking and kidnapping, and that's a fact. And no one cares. They're just, let's go pick up the TV guide and get a steak for dinner. What the heck is crazy?
You know why they don't care? Because it's like anything else in life. It's like anything else in life. It's not going to really care until it affects you.
I was that person. I will admit that was me.
Over the years, I have had clients who said, I think everybody that had a CPS case was a piece of what.
Yeah, I'm guilty. Guilty as sin.
Right. And then I got a case and, oh my God, this is the worst system in the world. It's corrupt.
Yeah, that's true. It is true.
Try being in that system.
So, and here's the other thing, I don't want to say directly, but indirectly, social workers, CPS, the government puts a spin on it, and it's saving kids' lives. Right? And do they ever? Yeah, they do. I'm not going to say they never do anything. Don't tell Ms. G I said that. But, that's the spin we put on it. It's all about manipulation and control and the story that we are going to feed the public. That's why, Darren, the only way that's going to do this, and I see this clearly now, is, this state by state, county by county awareness and voting.
Yep.
There's enough people out there to cause change. There's enough people that have been screwed to cause change.
There's so many.
Not only
so many people affected,
but in the past.
Right. You're right. These don't go away. So you got mothers, fathers, aunts, uncles, friends, relatives, this for one child. Now you multiply that by what is it, 300,000 kids a year? Now
Right.
you do that times each year, like you're saying, because they don't go anywhere. So let's say
Right.
each person is 5, that's 1.5 million voters a year, times, you know what I mean? Like it is just an exuberant amount of people that should be voting in favor of whatever this movement decides to waiver and the fairness of kids. Like we all have our own ideas and everything, but we need to get the candidates. Or if we can't get the candidates to be that place, we need to involve ourselves in that remedy.
Absolutely.
Like it's great, like
Absolutely.
you said. Like we'll get the voters from each state, but what if we don't have the people to vote? Or not the people to vote, the man to vote for. So now we need to address someone to put themselves into the spot
Well,
so that we
here's one of the things that I'm hoping that's going to happen, and that's the natural geometry to this thing. See, earlier I asked Lydia, did she have 25 names? Her answer was no. It was based upon her assumptions of what the law was.
Mhm.
Now, when I told her what the law actually is, I see, got 25 names. Yes, I do.
Mhm.
So
I come up with 100.
right. So every person, see how that multiplies like that? She went from 0 to 100 in
Right.
less than a half hour. And I'm
Mhm.
hoping that that type of multiplication will take place with all of the people in each of our organizations. Because look, let's face it, Darren, at least 25 people that have some type of social or familial or professional relationship to.
Yes, sir. Of course I do. Yep.
And that's understating it. Like she's now got 100 people. I only
Right.
asked her for 25.
Mhm.
So you can influence additional votes. If say you in Maine, do you guys elect judges?
Do you know what, Mr. Davis? I believe that they are appointed. I don't believe that we elect here because I
Maybe
know that
it
the
may be
last ones
it may
the
be like California. Sometimes you're appointed, sometimes you're elected, but either way, you have to face re-election after so many years. But
okay, I'm gonna look.
here's the other thing: the people that appoint have to be elected and re-elected. So that's another way to influence them.
In
Get it?
Maine, they are appointed by the governor, confirmed by the Senate, and serve 7-year terms.
Okay. Appointed by the governor. So that's a person that you guys elect, right?
Correct. Yes, sir.
So if you go to some governor and say, look, unless you're going to start appointing judges that are family friendly, we're going to get together and we're going to vote you out.
Hmm.
What do you think she or he would do? Well, they
Right.
probably scratch their head and say, well, maybe I need to take a look
Yeah.
at this. That guy,
I
that
was
guy,
screaming.
that guy, Garen Guay has 500,000 followers.
I do not have that many. I'm
But I'm,
trying.
I'm saying if you
Right.
did,
Well, no, that's what I did on Twitter when I was yelling at the two candidates from this past year. It was LePage against the incumbent, I can't, Mills, and I'm like, you know what? If one of you would just pick up the DHS voters, the people that are against CPS, up here we call it DHS, you would have an overwhelming abundance of whatever vote you needed to pick up the slack on.
right?
Now, I didn't see any change in what I was saying. I'm a small fish at this point. Now I'm getting since I've come on with you, I got a little muscle on me here, as known as Mr. Davis. So maybe they will listen now, but,
But
like that's the thing.
other attorneys are slowly joining us or wanting to associate with us, and I think it's a process, and the more and more that we can gather together, I think that you know um, we can vote in change because there's nothing
Mhm.
anybody can do about the vote.
Yeah, I don't know, whatever.
I know I saw that in the news, but for YouTube community standards, we know that's not true, but we just heard about it in the news.
Fair, and it's a fair situation, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
So,
the backbone of America.
so hey, Lydia, I don't know if you know this, but YouTube has community standards, and you
Oh yeah.
can't violate those standards or they will suspend you. We
Mhm.
got suspended for a
I
week.
just teetered on it there. I'm sorry, my bad. I wasn't thinking.
Well, I'm
Anyway,
glad you guys didn't get suspended from my interview.
No,
anyway,
because yeah.
so those are the
Oh,
reasons why. But you know what, Lydia, I would really, because we're running out of time here,
Mhm.
I would really like to talk to you and your attorney and come help you guys come up with a strategy to get your kids back now or at the 18-month date. I always like to do things early, put people on notice, and know that they're going to have to deal with me sooner or later.
Okay.
So do me a favor.
Mhm.
See that telephone number in the bottom right-hand corner?
Yes.
Call that number. Actually, you can call it today. Make an appointment. Somebody will call you back, and then hopefully you can talk to your attorney. Now, I'm going to tell you the bad news. There's a lot of attorneys who will say, I don't want to talk to Davis. He's crazy.
Okay.
Okay, so then you have to figure out what you want to do.
Yeah, she's a stickler.
I already know that. I've been through it, 101 times. Darren, were you going to say something?
I was just so I found this article. I wanted to kind of bring it up because her case was somewhat similar to mine. But I found this thing, and it's from the Office of Program Evaluation and Government Accountability. So I'm thinking that that's a pretty high standard of whatever. Now this is what they interpret, and it's called the Children's Fact Sheet. It says what
I've read
child
that.
abuse. It says what child abuse and neglect is not. It says some situations may indicate that a family or child needs community services or support, but do
Mhm.
not meet the definition of child abuse or neglect. Examples include living in poverty, including lack of food, clothing, or shelter that is not injurious to the child, accidental injuries, even if regular and recurring, parental or prenatal substance use, physical or mental impairment of the parent, including substance use, if it has little impact on the child, isolated incidents of domestic violence when the child was not present, and physical discipline like spanking as long as it does not cause bodily injury. Those, by their standard, are not abuse and neglect. Now, how many of the cases that you have, Mr. Davis, have been TPR'd saying that those things are abuse or neglect?
90%.
Now, how do we enforce this to move forward? Because we already have the office saying this is not it. Oh, what do we got? You got the answer?
It could be an answer. So I was reading that, well, at least in my area, that the grand jury was trying to investigate CWS, but they kept running into everything's confidential. So they asked for parents to write them, send them, their stories so that they could investigate them, so they could at least get like a baseline of what CPS does. So that could be a good alternate route, I guess.
You know what? Here's the easy way to fix that. Change the law that says grand juries have access to CPS information.
Mm-hmm.
And confidentiality doesn't apply to them. That's an easy fix. You think anybody did that?
No.
No.
You know why? Because do they really want to fix it? No. So you, as a voter,
Mhm.
have the power to
I got the power.
influence other people to get your candidate and to change laws. The good thing about it here in California is we have the what they call the proposition system as well. You know, you can get your proposition if you get enough signatures, you can get it on the ballot. You know, but you know what, Lydia, that's hard. Takes time, takes
Mm-hmm.
energy, takes resources. Is this something? And I'm not making a disparaging remark. I'm just posing a question. Is this something that we talk about on a Saturday morning, or is it something that we're going to live and do 10
We live
Saturdays?
and do.
Yeah.
I started criminal justice classes, actually, just because I don't know anything about the law and I want to see a change. So instead of talking about it, I'm going to try to
Good for you.
learn how to fix
Be
it.
a doer. I've written a piece of legislation to abolish CPS that I'm trying to get
My
out.
son
And
used to tell me, don't
this
talk
is
about
great.
it.
Be a doer.
Did you
Yeah.
hear what I said, Lydia?
Mm-hmm.
Don't talk about it, be about it.
Absolutely.
That's such a strong statement, isn't it? It really is. Don't talk about it, be about it. Like, it's very like rude, forward, and like demanding, like, stop being a little puke and do something instead of crying about it. It's the nice way of saying it. It's really an awesome saying.
All right. Before we go, Lydia, do you have any questions you wanted to ask me?
No, you basically covered them all, which was very helpful. Thank you.
Good. Mr. Guy, do you have any questions for me or for Lydia?
No, Lydia, good luck. I hope everything works out for you. And, Mr. Davis is here for you. And, whatever you need, use it. Use this resources that he provides for you, because, you know what, it's worth its weight in gold for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I
agree.
Don't be scared. Use this guy, because your kids are worth it, and he's willing to work with it. So don't be afraid for that. He's a great dude.
I've never reviewed your file. I've never talked to you before. But after doing this for so long, you kind of get a sense of things, of people. And I'm thinking, how does this lady, I'm looking at you and I'm thinking, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, how does this lady not have her kids?
Right.
I am really, like, it's difficult for me to fake being something I'm not. So telling the social worker at the beginning of the case that I wasn't going to kiss her ass because I didn't do anything wrong, and I'm not going to agree to something I didn't do, didn't really work out in my favor at all. So I don't recommend that.
Right. Hey,
Hey, you're not a liar. Yes, sir.
Did you hear what she just said?
Yes, sir, I did.
It's probably one of the most important things that anybody could say. And if you have a CPS case, don't get mad, get even.
Yeah, just water yourself down.
Get your kids back first, and then take them to federal court.
And sue the pants off.
Right. Because, here's the thing a lot of people don't realize, and I learned this from an old seasoned trial attorney by the name of Jerry Spence. People are making the decisions concerning your life, not the law. It's people. When you want something from someone, do you tell them to kiss your ass?
Right.
No. Look, think about this. When you have a friend, your closest
friend, a great way
friend,
to look at things, right?
When you have a friend or your spouse or your significant other, whoever, and you want something from him, do you start off by saying, kiss my ass? And if you don't do that, why don't you do that? Because you're not
getting it right.
You're not going to get it.
Yeah, there's time and a place for your ass, right?
It's the same with social workers. They're people. You expect, and everybody expects, the social workers to be fair, reasonable, and just, no matter what you do or say. No. If somebody told you in your job, hey, Lydia, kiss my ass, guess what? You're not going to give them anything. Guess what? You're probably going to bend over to make sure that they don't get anything.
That would just be bad karma. I don't know if I do. Yeah.
So think about that. Keep that in mind. Miss Lydia, I want to thank you for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
If you have any questions, give me a call. Again, thank you for sharing. Mr. Guy, thank you. It's always a pleasure. And we will be on tomorrow at 9:30. Mr. Guy, will you be on with us?
I will be here, Mr. Davis, waiting for you. Happiness Beach.
All righty. I will see everyone tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you.